Hello and welcome. This is BW CFO World Dialogue, where we talk to some of the important CFOs to understand how the role of CFO is changing. Now, the pandemic is just one of the business changes that have abounded the financial landscape. It has taught us how business transformation, digitization, and the role of CFOs to become a strategic business partner to the CEOs is quickly evolving. So much so, now we're asking ourselves, are CFOs the right fit to become the future CEOs? All that and more in today's interview, where I talk to Mr. Sugata Sircar, who has over 32 years in the financial landscape, 20 years being CFO. Right now, he's the CFO and the country finance director of Schneider Electric India. Mr. Sugata, very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, sir, I want to kickstart this by understanding how have you seen the role of CFO evolve during the pandemic? What are some things that you have noticed in terms of contingency plans that we will change forever?
Yes, absolutely. Because when the pandemic started, first it was a crisis mode for everyone, and so the requirements which came up in the organization pertaining to people, like arranging for work from home facilities, and in case of factories, making sure that there are proper safety measures wherever it was allowed to work, etc. And then also, organizing help wherever required. But then, while that was the immediate crisis situation, and as it dragged on, what it became clear is that we need to think about the years ahead and start replanning the organization so that it is more resilient in every way. So the P&L, the cash streams, everything had to become more resilient going forward. Because while there was a huge drop in activity last year when the pandemic started, it was evident that when the activity there would be a scramble on many things. There would be a scramble on resources like inputs and materials. There could also be a scramble on talent, as well as there could be a scramble on cash. So, so therefore, the long-term planning started from there, and and I think if you look at corporate results, especially over the last couple of quarters, it started showing that how companies have actually acted in making their P&Ls more resilient, so that the cost dynamics have become better, ratios have become better, and as revenues have started coming back, companies have started showing profitability going up. So yes, I mean it has changed the way CFOs, or it was forced CFOs to think differently.
And what are some practices that you've adopted from the pandemic that you think will be there going forward in all future plans?
So I think one of the things, and this is widespread, that it has pushed us faster towards digitization.
Mhm.
So one that we adopted is that we launched a whole project about digital ways of selling with the sales and marketing teams, using digital assets which were already available, but using the retraining people in that, and so that they are used more effectively, and customers are also more accepting of such digital ways of selling, so that even when the normalcy started returning, it was more what is now being called phygital way, which is a nice hybrid of wherever physical interaction is critical, there is physical interaction, but in other cases it's digital interaction. So you can do digital demonstrations of products. In our case, we can do digital virtual tours of factories. We can do factory acceptance tests digitally for equipment, etc. All this, and also the ways of connecting with prospective customers through events, etc. We've started using a lot of digital platforms and digital tools and processes for that. So these are ways by which we have started changing. And apart from that, of course, internally we use digital assets like Teams and conferences much more effectively.
Right. Right. So my next question is really tapering around going forward and looking future. Now I know the irony of saying let's look at the future and how how forecasting is going to be. I know the irony of saying that, but how do we infuse that dynamism when it comes to forecasting and annual outlooks in such a changing and dynamic environment? We need to do that, but how do we get there?
Yeah, I think first of all it means a change in mindset, because first of all we need to accept the fact that the plan has to be flexible, which means that if there are inputs coming from the market or coming from the environment, coming from the supply chain, that things are different from what it was when we had planned, we have to quickly change our tactics and our plan. So this is the first thing. So opposed to an annual budget and sticking with it, of course annual budget has to be done, but opposed to sticking with it, what we are doing is quarterly forecast. We have been doing quarterly forecasts earlier as well, but I think quarterly forecasts have become more and more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, so the plan has to be flexible. We need to get what inputs we can, and this actually pushes the teams to think fresh as to what could be another way of getting to the same goal with the
Mm-hmm.
change that you see around. So the agility which we have to bring in forecasting is different. So when we talk about forecasting accuracy, I think the connotation of forecasting accuracy is changing, because the way to reach the same goals would be different. For instance, I mean, if you see the what has happened this year is commodity prices as well as prices of certain components like electronics and certain services like freight have skyrocketed. So this being the situation, you have to work very quickly on pricing of the
Right.
product, services, whatever we do, and also have to work very quickly on the mix of what we sell,
Mm.
because the mix might now be different from what was planned earlier. Pricings absolutely has to be different. So this is what is coming in terms of flexibility and response. The response has to be very, very rapid.
Right. Now, like, because we're on the subject of annual forecasting and budgeting, I want to understand if we were to look at investments going forward, where do you think short-term and mid-term investments, what are the areas your organization is looking at and would go forward without hesitation?
Uh, See, when you think about investments, I think we need to step back and think about what the strategy is and how the CFO should work on strategy, right? So, and this is related. So let me give you a bit of context. So there is a global study recently which shows that most CFOs, about 70%, feel that they are very actively engaged and contributing in strategy.
Right.
However, in the same study, CXOs, other CXOs, like let us say CEOs or maybe the chief marketing officer or other CXOs, they feel that CFO's contribution and engagement in strategy can be much more. So their number is maybe 30% or so, where they feel that CFOs are contributing and engaging to strategy, whereas CFOs feel, 70% feel that they're engaging heavily. So there is a gap there, so which
Mm-hmm.
must, lead us to introspect. And so one of the things that I think is CFOs, when we engage in strategy, we engage a lot in the while the strategy is being built. So we do the financial analysis of each strategic proposal. So we do the business case. We say whether it works or doesn't work, whether the return on capital, the profitability is good enough or not. So we do all that, which absolutely
Mm-hmm.
has to be done. In fact, it has to be done much more rigorously, uh,
Mm-hmm.
using all the data analytics that we can get today.
Right.
But CFOs have to engage much more in making the strategy happen. So in enabling the strategy, and here comes the question of investment and resource allocation.
Right.
So while the strategy gets built and the CFO has access to all the financial parameters, etc., when the strategy is being executed or for the strategy executed, there is a resource planning which is required. And here I think CFOs have to step up, and that's where perhaps the gap remains,
Right.
because when if you have a number of strategic drivers which is a part of your strategy for the next 5 years, then it will need a certain kind of investment.
Mm.
And again, studies show that the resource planning or the investment planning in 90% of the cases tends to be the same as business as usual.
Okay.
So, so to answer your question, the investments that we are planning, and I'm sure a number of other organizations are planning, are linked to the strategic drivers which are there. And it relates to launching of new products. It relates to saturating certain market segments.
Mm-hmm.
It relates to investment in automation and digitization.
Right.
In the supply chain, it relates to reorganizing the supply chain in a way. because what is being talked about is now, and this is a learning from the pandemic.
Hmm.
What is being talked about is shorter supply chains and redundancies. What that really means is that you have to have multiple options for inputs, multiple options for
Right.
vendors, and a short supply chain, which is where it does not always need you to ship stuff from one part of the world to another part of the world. So short supply chain as well as redundancies. Now, to do all this, to organize, you need investments,
Right.
and therefore the investments that we are looking at, organizations should be looking at, is which should be aligned with strategic drivers.
Right. This also answers what I was talking about, the next question in terms of what key strategy pillars that CFO should focus on. So now I want to come to risk management, which you had mentioned earlier. And when we say risk management, I think the biggest risk we are facing right now with digitization is cybersecurity. And how can CFOs play a role in being a partner to the IT in harboring this change, in bringing about digitization? We know CFOs have always been at the forefront of digitization with SAP, but going forward, how can we partner with the IT and make this a safer journey?
Yeah, it starts with data. So I think CFOs can play a champion's role
Hmm.
for the data strategy, and what that means is data security,
Okay.
data quality, as well as data ownership. So you talked about cybersecurity. That's one aspect of it. So looking at the
Hmm.
data, ensuring that all critical data has owners, and thirdly, the quality of the data. And why it's important is that, as we push the digitization journey, as we push to get more data and analytics and use analytics in business, you'll find that the base data becomes more and more important. So when you try to do analytics, you'll find that the data may not be of the right quality, in the sense that it may be missing parameters, or it may be generated in a way which is not standardized. Processes for generating data, whether it's accounting data or market data, is not standardized. So you first need to fix all this. So this is where I think CFOs have to first play a part of championing the data quality and the data strategy, so that after that you can apply tools, you can apply processes for analytics, and then you're truly on a digitization journey.
Right. This helps me taper down to my final question. In terms of if we were to look post-pandemic, what does the CFO CV look like? What are some of the skills and techniques that are a must going forward?
Hmm. There are certain things which is coming out very clearly. One is being on top of technology trends. Now, what that means is we need to understand, one, the impact of technology on the business, and we need to understand technology in processes. So technology in business, we need to understand, because the whole value for business might change because of technology. For us in Schneider Electric, there used to be a time where we were mainly producing products for energy management, which is based on reliability and safety when you install, and for distribution of energy.
Mhm.
But today it is about connected products, it is about edge computing, it is about analytics and control, and all this is what we are offering as a solution. So the value proposition of what we offer has changed, and it's important to understand. This is just as an example. So one of the things is to understand impact of technology on business and on business models.
Mhm.
Secondly, it would be that the impact of technology on process, which we just talked about, the base of it, which is data. But we should be the first one to use analytics. We should be the first one to evangelize using of analytics and giving those inputs to the business, and helping with the actions. This takes me to the other thing, which is transformational skills, little skills about transformational leadership. So this becomes much more relevant today. It's not about leading a nice stable team, it is about leading transformation, and this is across businesses. Because what we talked about earlier, that we have to spend on strategic drivers, etc., that fund will come from reorganizing the business. So CFO as a CXO has to be involved in reorganizing the business and in processes, so that we can implement the strategy. So that's the third piece. And the last piece is the finance organization, the finance team has to be reorganized completely,
Mm,
and that the CFO has to be on top of.
right. This has been most
Okay.
engaging, and I think our readers will take away a lot from this. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for talking to us. Uh, Hope you have a great day ahead.